In this section, we'll look at the second term of Calvin Coolidge from 1924 through the election of 1928. It was a period that many people thought was sort of the triumph of conservatism. Coolidge once said, quote, "The government's greatest duty and opportunity is not to embark on any new ventures," unquote. Coolidge worked to keep the tariff high. Of course, Republicans always like that. You might remember Harding's 14-McCumber tariff. It was high on products like silk and rayon textiles and Chinaware, guns, and anything really that could be produced more cheaply by Japan and Germany. He also worked to lower taxes, an effort that was spearheaded by Secretary of Treasury Mellon. Initially, Congress had passed two revenue bills, one in 1921 under Harding and another in 1924, but progressive reformers were able to keep the rates relatively high. The 1924 revenue bill, for example, cut personal income tax slightly, but raised dramatically estate taxes and imposed a new gift tax. Mellon and Hoover were disgusted with the 1924 bill, but Coolidge ended up signing it. But finally, in his second term, you're really going to see Coolidge be able to sign some revenue acts that the conservatives really liked. He signed first the Revenue Act of 1926. It slashed the high income tax rates from 40% to 20%, and it abolished the gift tax. It also cut the estate tax in half. He followed it 2 years later with the Revenue Act in 1928, another victory for conservatives that it reduced taxes on corporations and consumption taxes. Coolidge's conservatism is also evident in the way that he twice vetoed the McNary-Haugen bill. It was a plan advocated by the progressive farm advocates. The government would help farmers by annually buying the surplus of 6 basic farm commodities: cotton, corn, rice, hogs, tobacco, and wheat, at the average price of those products between 1909 and 1914, when farm prices were very good. The government would then sell the surpluses on the world market, making up the difference with the tax, the so-called equalization fee on farmers. Not only did Coolidge twice veto that McNary-Haugen bill, he also pocketed vetoed the Muscle Shoals development. In World War I, the War Department had built 2 major plants to build chemicals that obviously might be needed in the war. Remember, you got in World War I, there was a lot of chemical warfare. Realizing it then needed power to run the plants, the government had started building a big dam on the Tennessee River in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. But the power plant hadn't finished by the end of the war. The question then was over whether to have the federal government finish the dams and use the resulting electricity to help nearby farmers. The farmers there still lived by kerosene lamps and wood stoves. The legislation was introduced that the government would finish the dam and then lease the property to a private company who would guarantee a decent return for the government. Coolidge supported the idea, but many ex-progressives opposed it, envisioning a large public power company to harness the water power of the entire Tennessee Valley. As a conservative, Coolidge liked the idea of a private company running it. Progressives were able to win support in Congress and presented a bill for public ownership, public operation, not only for Muscle Shoals, but as we say, for a lot of dams in the Tennessee Valley. And this was too much for Coolidge, and he pocket vetoed the bill. That means he just refused to sign it and expired. Business leaders who had hoped to build their own dams had lobbied against the bill, and they had ultimately convinced Coolidge to go along. One more thing about Coolidge, he was visiting Native Americans and agreed to put on some Native American headgear, which made him look silly, and a picture was taken, and he was criticized royally for it in the press. Made a lot of fun of. Overall, the nation welcomed Coolidge's conservatism, and the GOP, the Grand Old Party, the Republicans, won the 1928 election easily, another romp. Just like the 1924 election, the Democrats were divided between the North and the South. The South refused to endorse the candidacy of New York Governor Alfred E. Smith because he was for repealing Prohibition, and he was Catholic, and he had connections to the political machine Tammany Hall in New York. Only when Smith promised not to fight for the repeal of Prohibition did some Southern Democrats agree to support him. Even then, a group of Protestant clergymen led a campaign against him, fearing that if elected, the Pope would run the show. The Republicans, meanwhile, remained united. Coolidge decided not to run, and his Secretary of Commerce, Herbert Hoover, was nominated. Hoover promised to continue Coolidge's conservative policies, and particularly noted his opposition to public power and farm sports. He declared famously, quote, "We in America today are nearer to the final triumph over poverty than ever before in the history of any land. The poorhouse is vanishing from among us. We've not yet reached that goal, but given a chance to go forward with the policies of the last 8 years, we shall soon, with the help of God, be in the sight of the day when poverty shall be banished from this nation," unquote. It was a quote that Hoover was going to quickly come to regret, of course, because 7 months after his inauguration, the Great Depression hit. We'll talk about Hoover's presidency in the next lecture on the Great Depression. With the Protestants in the South campaigning against him, Smith didn't even carry the South. It was the first time the Democrat hadn't carried the South since Reconstruction. Outside of the South, Smith carried only Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Hoover won 21.4 million votes to only 15 million for Smith. Obviously, the prevailing prosperity of the time kept the conservatives in power. This concludes the section on Calvin Coolidge's second term and the election of 1928.